PC Sonic, the heart of your system.
Hello, Briony here from Kit Guru, and in this video I'm going to be taking a look at the Onyx PC from Stormforce. This is definitely more of a budget option. You're looking at a retail price of £650, so that's definitely out there for those of you that maybe don't have that much cash to spend on a PC, but you do want to get something that can definitely play some games. The components that you're going to get, you've got an i3-9100F processor, there's a GTX 1650 GPU, you've got 8GB of 2666 megahertz memory, and there's also a 250GB M.2 drive and a 1TB hard drive for a little bit more storage as well. So just to kind of check how affordable this PC was and whether it was kind of a fair price point, I put all of the components including the case into PC Part Picker, and it came out with a price of £510. But the thing is, if you factor in that maybe if you go to the Microsoft website, Windows is going to cost £120, and then Stormforce also include a 3-year collect and return warranty within the price of the PC, so it's hassle-free basically for 3 years. To me, the £650 asking price does seem like a reasonable cost to pay for a pre-built PC. I mean, pre-builts aren't going to be the best value for money option. I mean, they rarely are going to be cheaper than the price of buying the components separately. But in this case, I do think it is a good option for those of you that maybe aren't that confident and aren't that interested in building your own PC and you want a hassle-free option, then a pre-built is definitely going to be where that sort of comes into play. When it comes to the overall aesthetics of this PC, Stormforce have opted to use a Cooler Master case. You can tell from the Cooler Master logo on the front, but on their website they do list it as being a Stormforce Onyx Micro ATX gaming case, but it is essentially a Masterbox Lite 5 case from Cooler Master. So it does come from a well-known brand. I also like the fact that it is a Micro ATX case, so it's a more compact size. So if you have a smaller desk space or you don't really have much room at all, it makes it easier to maneuver as well, and it's also quite a lightweight case. In general though, because it does come from Cooler Master, they are quite a well-known company, this case does have good build quality. It feels like a nice solid sturdy case, and I think it's going to do the job pretty well to house these components. They are budget components, so you don't really need much more than this case, and I can see why Stormforce have chosen it. The airflow in this case is quite restrictive because you have got an acrylic window in the front, so it does kind of stop the airflow going to the fans. However, it does create a nice effect when it comes to looks. Obviously the 3 red fans are very attractive, and it is quite an easy case to match if you want to get some matching black and red peripherals, and there's no kind of money wasted on any RGB lighting components. When it comes to dust filters, you do get dust filters in this case, but the front dust filters really aren't very good. They're quite large mesh holes, so they're going to stop pet hairs, but they're not going to stop any fine dust particles. The dust filter towards the back of the case where the PSU is a much better dust filter. It's a finer mesh, and that should do a good job of ensuring the life of the PSU lasts as long as it can. I am just a little bit disappointed with the dust filters in the front of the case. On the side here you also get an acrylic window, so same acrylic as the front of the case, quite darkly tinted. I have removed it just for the sake of the video because it does reflect quite badly back onto the camera, but in general I think it does create a nice effect. You've got the red kind of shining out of the case, you can just about see the components inside, and overall I think it is a nice looking case with a decent amount of practical functionality as well. Taking a look inside the case, you can see that it does come with a Micro ATX motherboard, and it is definitely a more budget motherboard, but it fills the space well and definitely suits the smaller case. It's an ASUS H310 MAR2 motherboard, and I've got no problems with it really. The system doesn't need any more than that. It is definitely a more base motherboard. It lacks a few features and things, but the fact that you do have a more basic CPU, it works perfectly fine. So the CPU is an i3-9100F, and it is a recent CPU. It came out earlier this year. It's obviously a 9th gen processor from Intel, and it does lack a few features. So you haven't got any integrated graphics. You also don't have any overclocking ability either. But for this system, I do think it suits it quite well. It's got 4 cores. It has a reasonably high 4.2 gigahertz boost clock speed on a single core. And for gaming, kind of low-end budget gaming, it works absolutely perfectly, and I've got no problems with it. When it comes to the graphics, which is obviously the most important thing when it comes to a gaming PC, you've got a GTX 1650 GPU. It's got 4 gigabytes of VRAM, and I'm pretty sure it's an ASUS Phoenix card that runs at a pretty good speed as well. So with this GPU, Stormforce have obviously gone for the green team, but I can understand why they've done that. Even though AMD has some really good options when it comes to graphics at this price point, the GTX 1650 is the most kind of power efficient option. When it comes to the memory in the system, you do only get a single stick of crucial memory, and it is an 8GB stick, which is probably the minimum you want for gaming, and you do of course miss out on that dual channel performance. It is a 2666 MHz stick, but unfortunately I found that it can only run at 2400 MHz speed, because that's all the i3-9100F can actually support. With the system, 8GB, I mean, it's not running at the speed that's advertised, but I think it should be sufficient for the type of gaming that you're going to be doing on this system. When it comes to the storage, you have got that M.2 drive, which is obviously very nice to see in a budget system, but it is a WD Blue drive, so it doesn't really have the fastest read and write speeds. It's about the same as a standard SATA SSD. At 250 gigs, it's also not the largest either, so I can imagine it will probably fill up quite quickly if you're going to be installing a lot of games on this PC. You do have the 1TB hard drive for a little bit of extra storage, but it is another WD Blue drive. It's 4500 RPM, so it's pretty damn slow. I noticed any games that I installed on this drive, I noticeably spent longer staring at the loading screen, which is obviously not that great. When it comes to a budget PC, normally you have to compromise on something, and in this case I definitely think it's the storage. So fortunately it does have that spare hard drive slot, so if you find yourself that maybe you've got a little bit of spare cash in the future, I think upgrading the storage in this PC would be kind of a worthwhile thing to do, because it would definitely improve the speed and also the amount of space that you have available. Taking a look at the bottom of the case, you can see the power supply in this system. At first I was a little bit nervous because Stormforce on their website don't actually list what power supply they are using. They just say it's a 350 watt unit, but when it arrived I was quite pleasantly surprised to find that even though it is kind of an OEM power supply, so it's not something you can buy as a normal consumer, it is actually a pretty decent unit. So an FSP SP400A, it has the power efficiency rating that's kind of equivalent to an 80+ bronze power supply, so sort of get that in your head what we're kind of working with here. And it is 350 watts like they say, and at first I was like, oh, that doesn't seem very much, but I took a reading from the system and under load it uses 159 watts at the maximum, so obviously quite a friendly system on your electricity bill, but it means that also the 350 watt power supply is basically bang on. Stormforce have done some tests on it and they've chosen 350 watts because that's going to be the most efficient power supply to use for the system. You don't want to bang something that's like 500, 600 watts in here because the PC just doesn't need it. Also the power supply does come with some rather nice kind of black plastic cables. Normally you would expect those kind of horrific mustard, really badly braided cables, but they've got this really nice kind of black plastic coating, so of course that does definitely help with the overall aesthetics and the kind of cable management in this PC. And when Stormforce have done the cable management, they also seem to have done a pretty good job as well. There's not really much room behind the motherboard tray to do much with cables, but they seem to have tied them all neatly into place, and overall it is quite a neatly and well thought out put together system. So now it's time to move on to the performance testing for the Stormforce Onyx PC. I don't want to bore you all by going into too much depth in the video, so make sure you head over to the KitGuru website if you want to see all the graphs and all the written information in your own time. I'm going to start off with the cooling performance, and what I found in this case is that it does run a little bit warmer than I would normally expect. These components aren't really producing that much heat, they're quite kind of low-end components, but I did see a load temperature of 74 and 75 degrees. degrees, which is definitely a little bit higher than I would expect from these less powerful components. However, that is obviously well within safe temperatures, so even though the case is really quite restrictive, you're not going to have any problems with the components that are currently within this PC. Don't go putting an i7 or RTX 2080 in this case if you intend to keep it in the future, because they're probably going to get a bit too hot. But as the PC as it is, with the components that Stormforce have chosen, the temperatures are going to be absolutely fine. When it comes to kind of the acoustics testing that I did with this PC, I had some quite surprising results. The idle noise levels and the load noise levels were actually exactly the same, and I tested it a few times because I was like, that can't really be right. But when I investigated it a bit more, it made sense. So the front two fans in this case aren't powered off the connector on the motherboard. They're actually plugged into Molex connectors because the motherboard that they've used doesn't have any other spare fan headers. So that basically means when they're plugged into Molex, they're going to be running flat out the whole time. So they're going to be producing full amount of noise whether the PC is doing nothing or whether you're gaming. So it's not too much of a problem in the fact that it's not too loud, but it's obviously not a quiet, silent PC either. It's just going to kind of sit there and make fan noise the entire time you're using it, but I didn't find it irritating. I did also notice maybe the hard drive does make a little bit of noise as well. I don't know whether it's maybe because it's an acrylic panel instead of glass or something. I rarely hear mechanical hard drives anymore, but I heard that making a little bit of noise, and then the noise from the fans, you're looking at about 43 decibels, which is noticeable but not too loud. When it comes to the artificial benchmark, I started off with Cinebench R15 and R20. Those both kind of test the CPU performance of this PC, so unsurprisingly it didn't get a very good score. It was pretty much beaten out by everything from Intel and AMD, but it is definitely a more budget CPU, so it's obviously not made for doing those CPU intensive tasks, but it should be enough for gaming on. 3D Mark, it did definitely do a lot better. It kind of test it much more fairly when it comes to gaming performance, and in the 1080p benchmarks it actually got some pretty good scores. I also saw that the CPU and GPU are both pretty well matched. There's not one that sort of seriously outperforms the other, and also because it does have that 4GB of VRAM, it didn't fall completely flat in the 4K tests. So now it's time to move on to the gaming benchmarks, which are obviously probably the most important and interesting results when it comes to testing a budget gaming PC, because you want to know exactly what you can actually run on it. So I tested Formula 1 2019, which is kind of my newest game, and I also tested Fortnite as well, because I know it's extremely popular. And on those games, I could actually run it at kind of like very high ultra settings, still get a very, very playable FPS at 1080p resolution. So I was certainly impressed by that. I also tried a slightly older game, so GTA 5 was quite notoriously demanding to run when it came out because it does have the really big kind of open world environment, and this PC actually handled it really, really well. 1080p resolution, the highest settings. I was getting a very good FPS that even kind of shows that this PC, you could actually team it up with a high refresh rate monitor and you'd actually do perfectly fine at 1080p resolution. And that was certainly true as well when it came to testing it playing CSGO. So obviously an older game, it runs on pretty much anything, but I wanted to test it anyway just to see what FPS I could get, and it did incredibly well. 1080p, 1440p, it would take full advantage of a high refresh rate monitor. So if you're playing those less demanding older games, I think this PC would match up really well with something like a 144Hz display. So overall, what do I think of the Onyx PC from Stormforce? I really like the case. I think it's a good selection. It's a small, compact size. It's also attractive and well built as well. The kind of red fans create a nice effect, and there's no money wasted on kind of flashy RGB lighting. When it comes to the components, I think Stormforce have done a good job of selecting them. They're pretty well matched, and the whole thing is thought out and put together pretty well, minus a couple of niggly things. The RAM doesn't run at full speed, and obviously you want to know what you're getting is what you're paying for. So the fact that it doesn't run that fast is a bit of an annoyance, but it probably won't really have much effect on performance if I'm honest. Also, the storage is a little bit small and slow, so once you have got some spare cash, it's probably the first thing that you're going to want to upgrade. In general though, when it comes to actual gaming performance, this PC is really, really good. You get a great gaming experience for your money. You're looking at medium to high settings at 1080p resolution, and you're still going to get really, really good FPS, whether that's on old older games or also on the newer games that are coming out as well. So if you team this thing with like a 1080p high refresh rate monitor, I reckon you can have a really good setup for under £1,000. So overall, the Stormforce PC from Onyx, I do think it is a really good looking system. You've also got that 3-year warranty, which obviously means you're going to be hassle-free for 3 years. As long as you've got any issues, they're going to help you out, sort you out with it, pick it up, fix anything that goes wrong with it, send it back to you, etc. 3 years of hassle-free life. I think it's definitely sort of worth considering this PC if you're looking for something in the budget market. If you like this video from KitGuru, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more from KitGuru, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and please also remember to press the little bell icon as well, and you'll get a notification every time a new video goes live. KitGuru also have a Discord you can join. We've also got a Patreon if you want to support KitGuru in other ways, and we also have a merchandise store as well where you can pick up one of our lovely t-shirts or sweatshirts.